Clutch Report. Breakdowns, insights, knowledge. Thank you for tuning in. And here's your host, Jamal Bethia.
So this whole week, I have been promoting 6-0 versus 4-6 and whose finals record is really better between Michael and LeBron. And I'm excited. I'm really excited. I did some deep diving into both of their opponents. I did some deep diving into some numbers, and we're going to talk about them, and I'm really excited about that. For starters, welcome back into the Clutch Report. My name is Jamal Bethia. I'm your host. Like and subscribe. I need it. I'm trying to get monetized. I'm almost there. I'm about halfway, probably about 60%. And I'm really excited to continue to bring you guys excellent sports content. Sometimes I think we all feel like the NBA world gets a little stale with the conversations they have. But this is a conversation that I think needs to be had at a higher level. And I may even do a more in-depth video about this very thing in the future. Use even more numbers, use even more analytics. One thing I've often said to people is, when you look at Michael and his playoff championship runs just in the 90s speaking, if you look at the 90s as a whole, it was a great era for basketball from a standpoint of individuals and stars. But if you really look at the 90s from the standpoint of teams, there weren't many dynasties. And that's not here's a LeBron fan trying to denigrate what Michael accomplished. That's just a cold hard fact, to be honest. If you really look at it, Chicago was probably the only dynasty in the 90s. And I think that's very evident by the fact that in the 90s, you had, in those 10 years, about 5 or 6 different teams in the West really come through and get to the finals. There was no one definitive team or, anything that always just showed that they were dominant besides Chicago. And I think a part of that is when you look at the 80s Eastern Conference, that was probably the strongest the Eastern Conference has ever been. And I think it's on a bit of an uptick the last couple of years, but I still think it's the Western Conference is stronger nowadays. You got the Knicks and you got the Pacers even. You got the Celtics, the Cavs, the Sixers, even though the Sixers didn't really look very good this year. Embiid's injuries, Paul George's injuries, and unfortunately later in the season, Tyrese Maxey's injuries. So the East is trying to make a resurgence, and the East won the championship last year being the Celtics. They had a big win yesterday, and so now it looks like they're going to try to push it to 7 games. I agree with Stephen A. Smith and some of the other guys on First Take. Do not let the Celtics get to a game 7. Just don't. You're going to have a big problem if they get to a game 7 in their building. But the truth of the matter is the 80s was the strongest the Eastern Conference has ever been. Early in the 80s, the Sixers were pretty good. The Bucks were pretty good. The Pistons, obviously, mid to late. Chicago, obviously, as well. And so when you talk about conferences, the 90s East wasn't as strong. I mean, the Celtics and the Pistons got old. Chicago finally beat them when they were ready, but it was also around the time they got old. And so I think once you get to the 90s, you're looking at pretty much Chicago having gone through the gauntlet of the Celtics and the Pistons. There's nobody else that can really give you that level of like pushback or, competition or, what's the word? I'm struggling to find a word. It's nobody that can give you that level of resistance, that level of like challenge. You have to grow. You have to really get over this hump. Michael said it himself. You can't hold a grudge forever. And, I don't think we would have got those 6 titles without getting over the hump in Detroit. So he even gives credit to Detroit. Detroit pushed them to their limits. It made them become champions. And so I think even just mindset, not even just talent on the roster, mindset wise, Detroit prepared Chicago to compete at the highest level. But when you really look at the Eastern Conference, really the whole decade, to be honest, you really look at the 90s, you can't tell me one team. I'll start with the East. You can't tell me one team in the 90s in the East that you felt like, they might beat Chicago. And people always go to, well, Orlando, they beat him in 95. And I'm like, yeah, but Chicago was weaker because Horace Grant was gone. He was on Orlando. So their big man rotation was weaker, which was always Chicago's probably biggest weakness on the team. And then Michael having, just come back really from playing baseball, they always have this mythological lie that he was rusty in 95. Michael Jordan was not rusty in 95. He might have been rusty that last 20, 25 games that he played of that season. The first maybe round, he was rounding into shape. And maybe even the first game of the Orlando series, which went 6. You could say, okay, looks like a little bit of rust. But the truth of the matter is, in that Orlando series in 95, Michael Jordan put up 31 points and shot 47 to 48%. If you understand what that is against his career, he's a 30 points on 49.7% shooter. So he dropped 2%. He went up 1 point. Ladies and gentlemen, pretty much games 2 through 6 in that Orlando series in the second round, Michael Jordan was as good as he's ever been. That's the honest truth. Before that, you can say rust. During that Orlando series, games 2 through 6, he was not rusty. But because we see Michael as a winner, because he has a perfect finals record, and because he fought through the 80s to score no matter how they were defending him, we talk about him as if he's perfect in every aspect and every scenario. So when he actually loses, we can't just say Michael lost. We got to say, no. Let's find another reason. He was rusty. He was not rusty. Games 2 through 6, he dominated. They just lost to a better team. And Michael Jordan was even asked, and it was in a newspaper at the time. And maybe I need to find that newspaper. I saw it on the documentary on a channel. I think it's called, no, not Thinking Basketball. I'll find the channel. I'll post the video in the chat. The video was about why Dennis Rodman should have won 96 MVP instead of Michael Jordan. That's a whole nother topic. The point is, in 1995, the Magic were just a better all-around team than Chicago. Chicago was weaker. And that's the bottom line. Even Michael himself said that. One thing I give Michael is when he lost, he never made an excuse. He never scapegoated a teammate. We lost. We were a Horace Grant away, is what that newspaper article said. Hey, what do you guys need to do to get back to championship contention? We were a Horace Grant away. That's literally what he said. So he didn't make any excuses at all. He said, guess what? We missed Horace Grant, who is now on the other team, and had even said, yeah, that's not the same Chicago team. That's not the same Michael Jordan. Now, you might say to yourself, okay, Jamal, then explain 96. What happened in 96? What happened in 96 is very simple. They went out and got Dennis Rodman to fill their hole, right? Steve Kerr joined the team. Best three-point shooter in NBA history according to percentage. Not volume, that's Steph. Volume and percentage for Steph. Ron Harper, who used to average 22, 5 and 5 with the Cavaliers, blew his knee out. So his superstar days were over, but he was an intelligent ball player. He was 6'6". He was highly switchable on defense. Michael 6'6", Ron Harper 6'6", Scottie Pippen 6'7", Dennis Rodman 6'8", Tony Kukoc 7 feet, Luke Longley 7 feet. Chicago defensively in the 90s was a team like we had never seen. And so the funny thing is, people always want to act like those Bulls teams were bums. Oh, they were bums or they were mediocre and Michael dragged them. No, Michael had really good teams. Some of Michael's teams were ahead of their time. It's okay to admit that. They were ahead of their time. They really were. And so that's really what happened in 96. You retooled, you picked up better players. I mean, Michael hated the Pistons, but he knew how good Dennis Rodman was. So when they told him, hey, Dennis is available, Michael was like, go get him. Michael didn't come to them about it. I will give Michael credit. He never approached the front office about how to make the roster better or how to make the team better. He let them do their job. But there's something to be said about being able to trust that they can actually do the job. I don't know if LeBron's ever had that level of comfort with the front office that they could absolutely do their job. Doesn't mean you stick your hand in it if you're LeBron. But at the end of the day, he's been Jordan since he was 15. Sometime this is my legacy at the end of the day. Maybe I got to stick my hands in here a little bit, right? Okay. And the reason I went down that barrel just now is because we always love to talk about the weak opponents or the weak path to getting to the finals for LeBron. Ladies and gentlemen, you're not going to see what LeBron did again by an individual probably for 20, 30 years. That's if you see it again. Number one, from a health standpoint, to be healthy enough for 8 straight years to go to the finals, you're playing 100 to 110 games every year for 8 years in a row. If you understand NBA basketball, August, you kind of start training camp. September, you really get ramped up. October, you do some preseason games, and then late in October, the season starts. Okay, so late October, the season starts. Teams who never win a championship, never even compete for a championship, record is not even good enough to qualify for the playoffs. They're done second week of April. If you're competing for a championship, you're playing pretty much until halfway into June. Now, you just heard me say that training camp really starts in August. So you literally, from August to June, you're playing. And then you have pretty much a month and a half off and you're right back in the gym. So teams who never really compete for championships, they have from April to August, pretty much about 4 months off. LeBron had a month and a half off for 8 years. So even just from a health standpoint, you got to respect what he did. That's number one. Number two, yes, LeBron had a weak path to the finals in general. Those teams to get to the finals weren't very hard, especially because he built his rosters up to compete with what was coming out of the West. He wasn't worried about what was in the East. He was trying to worry about what was coming out of the West. But the point I'm making is that's not different than any other team or era or all-time great. You can't name me the team in the 90s that you really feared on a yearly basis could beat Chicago. Orlando did it once, and then the following year got that behind tapped. That was it. And then they broke up because Shaq, being selfish and greedy for money, as he also said about leaving Kobe eventually, Shaq just never saw the forest for the trees. I'm not mad at him. I do think Kobe was a better backcourt mate than Penny. Penny was really good, but I don't think Penny would have ever been Kobe. So leaving was a good choice. Look what happened to him. It landed him 3 rings. It immortalized him. But the point I'm making is after 96, Orlando broke up. So even if you felt like there's a rivalry potentially brewing, boom, they're gone. There was no team in the 90s in the East that could really hold the candle to Chicago. Let's just be honest. And the reason I say that is because the 90s was full of all-time greats, but they were not full of all-time great teams. Chicago was the only all-time great team in the 90s. And if you think it's a lie, tell me the all-time great team that history or the NBA commemorates. As much as we love the Utah Jazz, Stockton, Malone, pick and roll, unstoppable. Is there a documentary about the Jazz? I'm pretty sure there's something out there about the Jazz, but is there really a documentary out there about, the Utah Jazz? Like, no one commemorates any team he faced. And that's to prove a point that these teams were really good, but they were not great. And so to continue to be like, but LeBron ran through a weak East. So did Michael. The only difference is Michael won his. So like my buddy Oliver says, Michael never gave you a reason to question him. And I agree. Okay, fine. You face who's in front of you. At least get the victory. I agree. So 6-0 versus 4-6, it certainly looks better. It is better. You're undefeated versus losing more than you won. Okay, cool. But the problem I have with that argument is if you're just ignoring like competition in the finals, then I just don't understand where you're coming from, right? So look, let's just go ahead and get more into this. I know that was kind of a lengthy, opening segment, but all right. So when we talk about finals opponents, one thing jumps out immediately about Michael's finals opponents. Every single finals opponent was a number 1 seed. Now I know everybody's going to be like, see, he beat the best that they had every year. Technically, yeah. Technically, that is the truth. Technically, yeah. Okay. The 91 Lakers, 58-24, number 1 seed. The 92 Blazers, 57-25, just a 1-game difference, number 1 seed. The 93 Suns, which to me is Michael's most impressive series, 41 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists a game, shot 50% from the floor. He went bananas in that series. The Suns were 62-20, number 1 seed. The 1996 Sonics, 64-18, number 1 seed. The 97 Jazz, 64-18, number 1 seed, and the 98 Jazz, 62-20, and a number 1 seed. So, again, from a basic standpoint, 6-0, and he beat all number 1 teams that year. That's hard to argue with. Okay, cool. I understand that. For LeBron, 2007 Spurs, 58-24 record. They were only the 3rd seed. Part of that is because those Spurs were always a defensive juggernaut. They were not offensive, which means sometime they just caught the buzzsaw of a team playing better on offense. That's probably why they weren't first. They clearly still were the better team in the league. Like even the Lakers, when they three-peated, they weren't number one every year. And no one gave a damn because at the end of the day, they understood come playoff time, y'all got a problem. 2011 Mavericks, 57-25, third seed. 2012 Thunder, 47-19. This was a lockout shortened season, if you remember, but that was good enough for the second seed. 2013 Spurs, 58-24, second seed. 2014 Spurs, 62-20, number one seed. 2015 Warriors, 67-15, number one seed. 2016 Warriors, 73-9, best record in the history of the sport. And the team he beat in the finals coming back down from 3-1. Number one seed. 2017, Warriors, 67-15, number one seed. 2018 Warriors, 58-24, second seed. And then, of course, the 2020 Heat, the shock, 45-29 in a 73-game shortened season because of COVID, fifth seed coming out of the East. Nobody expected them to get to the finals. And the truth is they put up a hell of a dogfight in that finals, stretching that series to 6 because I think the Heat exposed some of the Lakers' weaknesses on that roster. And they were able to be competitive, including Jimmy's like 40-point masterpiece in game 5 when LeBron went absolutely freaking bananas in that game. That would have been probably the first time every round was won in 5 games. But hey, Jimmy was like, no, I'm not going to have that. I'm at least going to give you one. I'm going to give you one. And he gave one, and he was dog tired. And in game 6, it showed. And ironically, like I said in another video, the old man LeBron wasn't even tired. Okay, so here's a summary of Jordan's finals opponents. All were number one seeds in the Western Conference. But like I talked about with no juggernauts, they were strong elite teams, but there were no dynasties other than Chicago. There's a difference between a strong team and even you could say elite being number one. Every team that Jordan faced had at least 57 wins. Out of the 6 opponents, 4 of them had 60 wins. So they were strong teams. And let this argument forever, let this argument from me forever echo through the annals of NBA history when it comes to analyzing Michael and LeBron's finals records. Michael did not face bum teams because people have started to do that. Them teams were not even that good. They were trash. No, they were strong elite teams. They were all number one seeds. But there's honestly a difference between elite and iconic or elite and dynastic. There is a difference between the two. No opponents had more than one MVP and they were all aging stars. This is important because when you talk about Magic in 91, we know what he was going through. You talk about the Blazers, Clyde Drexler was probably 85-90% of what Michael was. But you could even say 95 maybe, but there's that 5-10% difference. Michael himself being the ultimate competitor, he said it. He was like, hey man, I'm not going to tell you Clyde wasn't a threat. He was a threat. But when y'all start comparing us, I took that shit personal. That's what he said. He didn't say shit. But he said, I took that personal. And I understand. Like, I'm going to show you there's a clear difference between us. Clyde's great. He ain't me. Mic drop. Notably, none of Jordan's opponents beat a 60-win team to reach the finals. That's just kind of a footnote. I don't really know if that matters as much, but that was something I wanted to throw in there because it was something I noticed as well. When it comes to LeBron, however, this is where the difference is for me in the argument. LeBron faced 4 Hall of Famers at once with the 2017-18 Warriors. 4 Hall of Famers at once. I don't know if any other team in the history of the sport faced 4 Hall of Famers at once. And I'm not saying that just to big up LeBron's case. I'm saying that to really add context. Are you guys really thinking about this stuff? 4 Hall of Famers at once. That's a lot. That's a lot. You got Steph you got to worry about can go for 30 to 35 when he need to. Kevin Durant go for 30 to 35 when he need to. And then Klay Thompson was the second shooter. Now he's the third shooter. Still finds his way to 20, 21, 22 points. All shooters. And then Draymond, all-time great defender, passer, playmaker. Like, come on. That's why when people were like, who would win? 2017 Warriors and the 96 Bulls. I'm like, yo, as great as the 96 Bulls were, they not holding a candle to no 2017 Warriors. Number one, because that was Durant on a path to get a ring. That's number one. He was an animal in those finals, 35, 8, and 5, shot like 57%. He was on a tear. So we're not even just talking about a guy who plays well. He was out to prove something. All I needed was a better supporting cast. And then you got two of the best shooters in the history of the sport to also worry about. And then you got one of the greatest defenders guarding the rim, playing defense, making passes. People aren't thinking about this correctly. They're really not thinking about this. 4 Hall of Famers at once is a lot to ask anybody to beat. And then, of course, he faced the 73-9 Warriors. Now, he beat them. But the point is, he beat the regular season. He beat the best regular season team of all time. No team Michael faced did that. He faced Tim Duncan and the Spurs 3 times. I talked about this. This is one of the reasons I always said LeBron had harder finals opponents. Because at the end of the day, we all understand the Spurs are a dynasty. Can we not act like we don't get that? Tim Duncan's in the Hall of Fame. Tony Parker's in the Hall of Fame. Manu Ginobili's in the Hall of Fame. Greg Popovich just stepped down finally. As a Spurs fan, I felt about 2 years ago it was time for him to go. I really did. And I love Pop. Thank you for everything you did. But I feel like it's a new time. We need a new coach. We need new branding. We need new jerseys. We just need a lot of new everything. The classic silver and black. That's great. And I'm not saying we should go away from those colors. But we need something more stylish. Like, you got a lot of young guys. Like, tradition is one thing, but not deviating from what used to be. It's just a whole different issue. So I appreciate Pop. Always smacking my microphone. I appreciate what Pop gave us. I really do. But honestly, it was time. But let's be honest. Those 3 players and that coach are all in the Hall of Fame now. So again, that's literally a dynasty. Michael didn't face a single dynasty, let alone 3 of them. He faced 3 different dynasties. The 2007 team, largely defensive. The 2013 team, aging but still great. Kawhi Leonard added to the mix. And then the 14 team, out to prove something. Now you got a Spurs team that's still heavily defensive and got 3-point shooting everywhere. The Spurs shot 46% in the finals from 3 in 2014. Do you understand? In the almost 80-year history of the sport, that's the only time that happened. LeBron played against the only team in the finals in the history of the 80 years of the NBA to shoot 46% from 3. As a team, they shot 37% during the regular season. That's damn good as a team. As a team in the finals, they shot 46%. They're making almost half of their threes. Oh, but because he's supposed to be the GOAT, he's just supposed to find a way to win. Don't get me started on the unrealistic LeBron James expectations. Just don't get me started. He faced deeper and more analytically strong teams. During it, LeBron faced deeper, more analytically based teams in his run. And part of that is because of floor spacing, right? We understand that during LeBron's generation and as time went on, the 3-pointer became more important. So we're talking about a different league that can score at a much higher clip. You know what I'm saying? These are the average offensive and defensive ratings across their finals runs. On average, Jordan's teams were 4th in offense and 6th in defense. That basically means top 5, right outside of top 5. You add those 2 up and you divide them. That would give you number 5, right? 4 plus 6 is 10. Divided by 2 is 5, right? But the point is, 4th in offense on average, 6th on defense on average. LeBron's finals opponents were 5th in offense on average, top 5, and 7th in defense. So the teams LeBron faced were a little weaker on defense and turns out a little weaker on offense as well. And again, this is based on regular season, so I'm not basing it off of playoff ranking. But in the regular season, this is what they were able to do. So when you talk about a 6-0 versus a 4-6 record, which record is really better? This is probably obvious to you guys, but honestly, 6-0 is still better. And I'm going to tell you part of why. He three-peated twice. Three-peating twice is damn difficult. Because the second three-peat, Michael's between 31 and 35 years old. So you're talking about a guy that's older. Now, you might say LeBron just started looking old at age 40. And I agree. But the point is, most players, until the one and done rule hit the NBA, most players kind of played 2 years, 3 years, sometimes 4 years in college. So in Michael's day, guys were coming in the league anywhere between 21 and 23. So by the time you were 31, you were considered a little older. You know what I mean? You kind of started here, you got better, and then you slowly started to taper off. LeBron, Steph, Kevin Durant, some of these other guys, they're changing the narrative with longevity. So the difference now is 31 and 32 and 33 isn't seen to be as old as it once was. And a part of that is the spacing and the shooting threes. You know what I mean? We saw this with Ray Allen. We saw this with Reggie Miller, 18, 19 seasons in the league. As long as I can do this, I can dominate and I can contribute to a team. I don't have to jump and run. And that was why people didn't understand how LeBron was this freakishly athletic this whole time. Because it's like you use your athleticism, so much that usually by now, for most people, it's just gone. Right. But the point is, it's 2 3-peats. If it was 6 rings every other year, 6 rings, like Tim Duncan got 03, 05, and 07. 99, 03, 05, 07, and then 2014. Even if it was every other year, 91, 93, 95, 97, 99, 01, I would have still seen it as just as big of a deal. But the truth is, 2 3-peats is just, that's just crazy. And you got to understand what Michael did for the Bulls franchise. When Michael started playing for the Bulls, they weren't even ranked as far as like all-time amount of championship wins for a team. Now they're like 3rd. Do y'all understand that? Like they're 3rd. Like the Celtics and the Lakers are always, of course, at the top. I think if I'm correct, I think it's the Celtics ahead of the Lakers, and I can double check that. But the point is the Celtics and Lakers are at the top. We understand that. But 3rd is the Bulls with 6 rings. And the crazy thing is now is the Spurs 5th. I mean, it's the Spurs are 4th with 5 rings. And you know what's crazy? The Warriors are actually in that running too, now with 4 rings because of Steph. I talk all the time about Steph needing to at least be in top 5, in my opinion. Not top 5, top 10. He needs to at least be on your top 10 list. All right. So I told you what my conclusion was. Let me give you a few details that contextualize a lot of the comparisons between Mike and LeBron. So Jordan faced all number 1 seeds. Kudos to that. That's real. The problem is they were really good teams, but none of them were juggernauts. And that's not Michael's fault or anything. But when you have an average of 57 wins, 4 of your 6 opponents has 60 wins, no one should ever question the strength of your winning or anything, especially when you have a blemish-free record like 6-0. However, even though I do think Michael's 6-0 was more impressive than 4-6, which is obvious, like even if it was 6-4, 7-3, 8-2. I think the argument could be different, but I still think we shouldn't treat it like it's way better. And I'll tell you why. Because LeBron, 7 of his 10 opponents are all-time dynasties. The Spurs 3, the Warriors 4. And 2 of those years were the Durant Warriors. And 1 of those years, Kyrie and Kevin Love were hurt. So it's like, if y'all really add it up, you can't compare it like everything was everything and LeBron just still found a way to lose. That's not what happened. But because of what happened against Dallas, every time LeBron loses, people act like he just chucked a bagel. Like he just showed up and played horrible, as if every team is a Dallas scenario. Oh, they lost because LeBron just couldn't do enough. I'm like, that's not the case. And it's not fair, quite frankly. 7 of his 10 opponents are dynasties. 70% of the time you're facing dynasties, you're going to have a hard time coming out of most of those winning, if we're honest. The Warriors, like I said, Warriors 4, 2 of them were Durant, and 1 of them were at least without his sidekick, and then Kevin Love as well. I talked about this earlier, these 2 last points. The 17-18 Warriors had 4 All-Stars. 4. You can't show me a team Michael faced that had more than 1. And LeBron faced these guys twice. Now, maybe Draymond wasn't a all-star in 18. I don't know. But the point is, in 17 and 18, to my knowledge, he faced 4 all-stars and guys who are potentially Hall of Famers, 4 of them. He faced more MVPs and he faced more Hall of Famers. So the truth of the matter is, LeBron should have more losses than Michael Jordan. It's just a fact. He should. You faced harder competition, you're going to have a harder time winning. Now, this video isn't really anything to me about the GOAT debate, but I will just say this little small tidbit. Stephen A. Smith and LeBron, it's not a secret, they have a quarrel going on. Stephen A. Smith once said, give me LeBron for the first 46 minutes of a game and give me Michael for the last 2. To me, that's a mic drop, case closed argument for GOAT. Michael's the GOAT and LeBron's right behind him. And when I say right behind him, I mean like this. Most people have this opinion that it's this, and that's just simply not true. Nothing about the numbers, the analytics, the accomplishment, nothing agrees with that. Nothing. A perfect finals record against weaker competition, not crazy weaker, because again, Michael's competition was still elite, and he still faced all number 1 seeds. Take no credit from that. That's not the same as facing Dynasty 7 out of your 10 trips. It's just honestly not. And if we're not willing to admit that, then again, we're not having an objective basketball conversation. I want to have objective basketball conversations with people. I don't want to talk to fans. Fans are illogical and stupid. I don't want to talk to them. I want to talk to people who really want to have a sports conversation. And if we're having a sports conversation, Michael's record does not ever need to be challenged just because he didn't face dynasties. But you can't pretend that he faced the same level of competition as LeBron. You just can't. LeBron James had a harder time, particularly in the finals. 7 out of your 10 trips are dynasties. Now, otherwise than those dynasties, the Mavericks, they were only together for a season. They were aging and contract issues, and they broke up. It was unfortunate because who knows if we could have got a Dallas-Miami Part 2 and LeBron could have got his first ring on the Mavericks. That would have been even better. And then, of course, the Thunder, they were young. They would have been dynastic, but they broke up. They didn't want to pay $20 million for luxury tax penalties, so they let go James Harden. Stupid. And then, of course, they lost Kevin Durant, pandering to Russell Westbrook too much. Stupid. And eventually they traded Serge Ibaka. So like the team broke up. They were young. They were all 23 and under. They had dynastic implications, but they weren't a dynasty. And then, of course, there was the Miami Heat in 2020, which is a full circle moment. The team he won 2 rings with and went to 4 finals he faces in the finals in 2020. And everybody's like, cupcake, Mickey Mouse ring. I'm like, I mean, damn, 7 of his 10 finals opponents were dynasties. You can't give him a break on one opponent not being the best in the league. I've said this so much. People say so many things based off of not liking LeBron, and I wish they would just admit that. Again, my buddy Oliver, he always would drag LeBron down. I would say, bro, you just don't like him. I never said I did like him. Yeah, but you're saying things you act like are facts when it's clearly just you don't like him. Just say that and leave it alone. This is just human psychology, and I say this all the time. When you like something, you give it more credit than it deserves. When you hate something, you criticize it harder than it deserves. It's very simple. A lot of people, there's something or some things about LeBron that rub people the wrong way. And because of that, they take credit from him, and it's not fair. 7 of your 10 trips to the finals are dynasties. You're not going to be undefeated. I don't give a damn how great the player is. I just don't care. I don't want to hear it. I really don't want to hear it. And at the end of the day, give him a break. The 2020 Heat, okay, they were 5th. They weren't 1st. They weren't 2nd or 3rd. Fine. But the point of the fact of the matter is you got to respect LeBron's finals resume. You do. Outside of Dallas, you can't show me. I go smacking my mic again. Outside of Dallas, and I'll even throw in 2007 because LeBron was not great in 2007. And I actually talked about this in one of my very first sports videos back when I had a mindset motivational podcast and I did sports on the side before I really focused on sports. In 2007, LeBron was already averaging for career 27 points on like 47% shooting. In that 2007 finals, he was 22 on 36. So LeBron himself didn't honestly play great in 2007, but we gave him a pass because it was the dynastic Spurs and he ain't had no real help and we knew it. That's the truth. But outside of 2007 and 2011, Every other year, meaning all other 8 finals appearances, LeBron balled out of control. He had games where his impact wasn't the same and you saw him kind of not. All of those things happen. People had bad games, just like they were up 2-1 in 2015 and he went 7 for 22 when they lost game 4 and they lost game 5 and 6 and they lost the series. But the point I'm making is a lot of the time LeBron gets put in these categories or these scenarios where it's like, oh, if you're great or if you're better than Michael, then do what Michael did. And I'm like, but Michael didn't have that level of competition. So it's not fair to say do what Michael did. Michael didn't have to face these level of competition. And it's funny because the 2011 Mavericks, the narrative we have that year is because LeBron lost and choked while losing. Like losing happens. Choking while losing is different. But the problem is that same 2011 team swept the Lakers in the second round. They had just gone to 3 finals and won 2. But shh. We're not allowed to say anything negative about Kobe, whether he was alive or passed away, unfortunately. Rest in peace to one of the GOATs. But we're not allowed to say anything honest. We're not allowed to say anything honest. Kobe got 5 rings. He only got 2 MVPs. Shaq was better for 3 of them. Mic drop moment. Shaq was better for 3 of them. And then in 2011, you get swept by the same team that eventually also beats the Thunder, who made the finals the following year because Dallas broke up. And then you beat the Heat. So why are we not saying Dallas won the hardest championship in the history of the sport? Why are we only saying LeBron choked? Because LeBron did choke. Even he knows that. Even he said that. I got to be better. And he has been. But my point is, that's how narratives lie. Oh, well, JJ Barea was showing him up and Jason Terry was showing him up. Dallas was on a heater that year. Did you watch, like, outside of the finals? If you watch, I watched that Lakers series in total freaking shock. Game 1, the Lakers had the lead. In game 1, the Lakers had the lead and they let it slip and they lost the game. After that, Dallas ran away with the series. We were like, wow, like, okay. The point I'm making is, outside of those 2 years, you can't tell me another year LeBron flat out didn't show up. Because after that, it was the Thunder. And then 2 times the Spurs. And then 4 times the Warriors. So for a 6-year span, LeBron faced the Spurs twice and the Warriors 4 times. Who in their right mind expects him to be undefeated out of that? Come on, man. So by the time 2020 came, damn, he deserves a break. He just spent 6 years playing over 110 games, getting a month and a half of a rest. You played against 2 of the best dynasties to ever play in the sport 6 years in a row, but y'all complaining about him facing the number 5 Heat in 2020. Get out of here, seriously. This is why I be telling people shut up about sports. Like, come on. What is he really supposed to do with that? If you're better than Jordan, you're supposed to find a way to win. Because that's what Jordan did, right? Jordan beat the best that there was in his era. But there's a reason history does not commemorate any of the teams Michael faced. Being the best in your era doesn't mean you're one of the best all time. That's a good one. I'm glad I thought of that. I thought of that on the spot. Being the best in your era does not mean you're one of the best all time. No one talks about the 97-98 Utah Jazz. Nobody talks about the 96 Sonics. And this is not disrespect to them. It's just the truth. For their era, they stood out. The Blazers made the finals in 90 and 92. Charles Barkley swore he prayed to God and God told him they'd win the finals in 93. Like 93 is the only championship I don't question anything about Michael. You elevated your game. You averaged 41 a game, 8 rebounds and 6 assists and shot 50%. Tip your hat to Michael. Tip your hat. Tip your hat to Michael. I tip my hat to a guy who did all of that to win. But compared to the competition LeBron has had, it's just not the same thing. And if you want to talk about LeBron's weak Eastern Conference in his runs to the finals, I'm with you. But you got to mention Michael's. Because if you're being honest, he did not come through a bunch of strong teams in the 90s. And I say in the 90s, the way I said it, because people love to go, what you mean? He fought through the Pistons in them. You crazy. Get out of here. That was the 80s. Michael didn't sniff a finals in the 80s. In the 90s, Them teams weren't the same as the Pistons and the Celtics. They weren't. I'm not sure some of them 90s Eastern Conference teams could have beat the early 80s Sixers. Real talk. I mean, real talk, no cut. I'm not sure some of those 90s Eastern Conference teams could have beat the 80s Sixers, who swept the Lakers in 83 to win the title, by the way. So at the end of the day, 6-0 is 4-6. Michael's my GOAT, but LeBron's not far behind. That's people's emotion. If you think it's like this, that's your emotions lying to you. It's like that. It is. And the truth is, if LeBron would have won in 2015 anyway, they might at least be even. Let's be honest. They might have been even. But give Michael his credit. He beat all number one teams. Really good team. Even though they weren't juggernauts, they were really good teams. He beat all number one teams in his era. He did what he was supposed to do. You play who's in front of you and he beat them. Tip my hat to that man. Cool. But LeBron had harder finals opponents and his record honestly makes a little more sense. It honestly does. So that's what I think. Obviously, I'm not saying anything nobody else didn't already think, but 6-0 is better than 4-6. But when you contextualize it, you should respect LeBron's finals record a little more than we all do. Peace.